So today I'm going to talk about training in Domo and how I used Course Builder and Google Analytics to implement all of our training within our Domo instance. So to give some backstory before I go into what I do specifically with the training, I want to talk about custom roles. Use the mic? Oh. All right. Okay. So this was a reference material that we based our custom roles off of. And this is reference material that Domo put out. And we have some of these roles. We have like a data consumer role, a specialist role, major Domo. And then you can see these were the recommended trainings they wanted for the roles. But when we started customizing our roles, we found that the training that Domo had provided didn't necessarily work with our roles because we had, different grants that weren't available that these training would cover. So going into, if you guys don't know about custom roles, this is something you have to get enabled. I highly recommend it for those of you that don't have it. This is kind of what it looks like in the admin section. You can go and select, a lot of different things, like editing cards, exporting. And this is where a lot of the material that Domo had provided would cover something like editing pages, and maybe our basic role doesn't allow that. So we had to customize the training for that. This is an overview of our roles. I won't talk through all of them, but the basic is we have like a social role, and we have single sign-on, so anyone who logs on just becomes a social user. And then from there we have a view-only user, and then we go into users who can edit cards and pages and export data. And then we go into our actual content creators, and that's mainly the data specialist and the Domo master are similar roles. One just has access to certain data, and the other has access to all data, because we needed some users to be able to access all data in the system. And then we have our major Domo, which is what I am, and then our IT admins, because our system is managed by me, which I'm not in IT, but then we have our IT who controls like our workbench and some of the tokens and stuff. So going into the training, we have a training like dashboard where I show all the different paths, and then this just kind of goes over the different paths that we've developed. So every single one of our users has to take a security training. This is just based on the data that we work with. We don't want users inputting certain types of data into the Domo instance, and so we want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And then we also go over all of them, what all our roles are, and then most importantly, the difference between the roles in that, we have two roles that can see all data. So regardless of PDPs, regardless of anything, we have users who can see all data. So it's important for a lot of our departments to understand that. So going into the training part, where I built the training is Course Builder. So many people probably don't know about Course Builder. Let's see, raise a hand. Does anyone know about Course Builder? All right, so not a lot of people, which is not surprising. So it's a great tool. If you don't have it, go to the App Store and download it. And a little bit about Course Builder. So this is what it looks like. And so basically it just allows you to make courses. If you were with Domo a few years ago before they went to learndomo.domo.com, you used to be able to download apps in the App Store. And that's basically what these were. So you could download the app assets, and then you could import them into here. And I think I go over that a little bit later on. But I basically used that, added some branding, changed some of the screenshots to make it a little bit more personal to our instance, and then published that to our instance, and then I could track all of the users on there. So this is where you'll see the Google Analytics come in. So when you're previewing and exporting your Course Builder, you'll see there's a spot for a Google Analytics tracking ID, and I'll go over how you can get that later on. And then you just click Publish to Domo. Once you publish to Domo, it just goes into your asset library, and you'll be able to create a card from it. And here's some resources about where you can get the courses with learndomo.domo.com. It moved a little bit. I put a link in there at the end of the slides, but this article goes over where you can go to download them, and then how you can import them into Course Builder. That way you start with a starting point rather than starting fresh. I always find it's easier to get Domo-made content and then just add or remove things. So this is what it looks like when you publish the app to Domo. So you'll find it in the asset library, and then you'll just click Create a New Card, and then from there it just is like any other card. So these are some best practices we found with Course Builder. Course Builder does have a Course Builder on Course Builder. So there is some training material in Learn Domo where you can get an app on Course Builder, and it kind of just goes over some best practices and some things about how to use it. There's also a knowledge base article on it. The biggest things that I take away from it is that sometimes when you're publishing an app from Course Builder, it just say it won't publish, and so you don't really necessarily know what the error is. And so most likely what those are comes to sizing. So you have to make sure your app alone is less than 100 megabytes, and then the video sizes as well. And then you can also, you'll want to check the videos that you use inside of Course Builder. Sometimes, like you can use videos from YouTube or use videos from Domo University, and those are put in there using IDs. And sometimes when new videos get posted, the IDs change, and now all of a sudden your video doesn't work, and then you get, emails from users like, hey, this video doesn't work. I get those all the time. And so I would just periodically check those to make sure the videos haven't changed. So this is an example of one of the trainings that we did, so our security training. And so this is one that all of our users have to take, and it's just a basic of going over some of the basics of our custom roles, and then also the sharing of data. So there's a lot of different ways that we can share data, between sharing cards, sending a scheduled report. Sometimes users just think, hey, I send a link, now that person has access to the card. But that's not true, right? We have to share a card. So kind of just go over some of those basic things. And then we go over all of our different roles and access rights. And then we have a quiz. So the quiz is another thing that we track, and then we tell all of our users, you have to pass the quiz in order to stay in Domo, and if they don't pass it, then eventually we kick them out. Because obviously people have to be a licensed user in order to look at this training since it is in Domo. But these are an example of some of the questions that we have. It's just 3 questions, but using Google Analytics, we're also able to track all of this. So I'll show you that in a minute. And then also at the end, you can do some feedback. So we track how people go through the pages themselves and how long they spend on each page in the course. And then we look at the quiz, and then we look at the feedback that they receive. And so I try to use this just to know, is my training helpful or not, right? So you can make training, but it might not be helpful. So this is some of the prerequisites that you'll need to actually track the training. So obviously you're gonna need Course Builder, and you can get that from the App Store. You're gonna need a Google Analytics account. You're gonna need to create a property for Domo. And then from there, you're going to need to set up some custom variables. There have been some issues I've seen with Google Analytics 4 and what's coming out. And so you may have some issues setting it up. But if you do want to try to set it up, you can always reach out to me on the dojo, and I can help out. There is a knowledge base article on how you can set up those custom variables. I think there's 3 that you have to set up in an app, an instance, and I think a user ID. And then once you have all of those, you're going to use the Google Analytics preferred connector. It looks like the image got a little messed up there. And then you're also going to need the Domo Stats people data set. And then what's behind the image, I think, is training data, the training event data to track the quiz and everything. So this is an example of what Google Analytics will look like. And these are the custom variables that you're going to set up. And then once you have the property set up, you should see an ID right here, and that ID is what you'll put in Course Builder whenever you go to publish it. So it's got a little bit messed up, but the hardest part that I found when setting up Google Analytics was getting the data from the connector. So when you are using the connector, you have to set up a custom report, and so it was a lot of trial and error for me of what columns I needed to pull in through the report. And so I just added all the ones that I use here for you. And then there's a date range that you'll put in there. And then I added all of this sample data into the Dojo Domo instance, which I can plug in later and show you if we have time. And then I put in all my data flows and everything as well. So we've got example data in there, all the data flows, and then an example dashboard of what I put together. And then same thing with the training events data. I've got a sample data set of what that looks like, and that's in Domo. And then these are the details of all of the different metrics and dimensions that I used for setting up the report. So this is an example of what the dashboard looks like in the Dojo instance. So I've got all of my sample data of all my different users, and this is why you want the people data set, because you want to be able to connect your user IDs in order to see all of the different things that you have on your users in your instance. And then you can filter on the different roles. And then we use the roles too to figure out what's required or not. So when I set this up, that was what the other thing that you need that was covered by the image, sorry, was some training thresholds. So like I have certain time where I say, a user needs to look at this training for 5 minutes in order for me to mark it as complete. In some cases, they look at it for like 4 minutes and 45 seconds. So I have a method in there to override some of those things. That can also be found in the data flow. But overall, I kind of just have like a basic chart, that shows what are the overall completion rates of my users. And then we go down into each user and show if the training is required or not. And then it'll go into some more specifics of how long they actually viewed the training. Then we got the quiz. And then I have some app tracking where I set up an alert. So that way, anytime someone views a training course, I get an alert that says someone viewed this training course. I'll check to make sure, did they actually look at it for a good amount of period of time, or I'll check the table, did they get marked as completed, and then I'll share the next training course with them. This is an area like I'd like to work on because I think I've seen some new not PDP, but group management put out there to where you could power groups with a data set. And so what I'd like to do next steps is look at the data set that I've made with this, and if people have completed certain trainings, I could put them in this group by having a data set that powers that, and then the training automatically gets shared with them. I just haven't taken that next step there, but that would be the next thing that I go to. And then I've got the training feedback rating over there, which I also get an alert for when someone puts a rating on. And then I also have a PDP version of this data set. So on our main dashboard, I'll show the same table where it'll only show that user's data. And so I'll have 2 data sets on the dashboard. I have 2 data sets coming from the data flow. One that has all my users and one where I just turn on PDPs just so I can show this on my main dashboard to my users so that they know what training they've completed. And I think that's most from the presentation. These are all the important links. I've got links to the data flows and the dashboards in Domo, all the other knowledge base articles. I did do an I Solved It with Domo on YouTube a couple years ago. And then there's the Learn Domo course about course builders. So I think, am I good on time to show? Where did Eddie go? Oh, there you go. I'm just going to plug in and show around. I guess when I plug it in, if there's any questions, I could take those.
Yeah, are there any questions?
I know I went through it a little fast.
For
Grant.
Ashleigh?
Oh, my dojo handle? Good.
Yeah, what's your dojo handle?
My dojo handle is, I think it's just Ashleigh. Yeah, just Ashleigh, but my name is spelled weird. So it's Ashleigh, Ashleigh. So, all right. Oh, there's me on the dojo. Okay. Yeah, there's me. I'm a purple belt. If you're not in the dojo, highly recommend getting into the dojo. Ask some questions. That way I can get points. So here's the dashboard. I think I shared it with the default of the Domo instance. For those of you that don't know, this is our Domo dojo instance. If you're not in it, I think Alexis could add you, right? Jay. So admins, raise your hand. Yeah, so if you're not in this instance, find them and they can get you added. We try to get all of the newest stuff in here so you can go play around. That way you don't have to play around in your main instance. And then you can also check this out. So here is the dashboard. If it will scroll. Okay. Yeah, and so in this case, the PDP one is showing me all of it because I don't have the policies on. But then let's go in and look at the data flow here. All right, so this is the data flow that we got going on. Let's see here, how zoom out some more. All right, you see that? Okay. So this is where we have the just basic view pages, and then I've got some formulas, some filtering, just some cleanup stuff that I did because sometimes I rename the courses in Course Builder, and then that doesn't translate into the data, and so you got to do some cleanup there. And then I've got the training app times to where I check, did the person complete the training? I've got our people data set to pull in roles and emails. And then I've got the event data down here. This is where I get the feedback and the quiz information. And then I guess we could probably pull some of these up if it will work on the iPad. Okay. So this is like how I extract the quiz from the event label. It's like just one giant long string, and so we have to go in and pull what they were actually received on their quiz. And then in some cases, I do some checks there. If they did multiple attempts of the quiz, you gotta, pick the latest one. And then, let's see what else we have. So this is where the different checks. So based on the different roles, we can check, is this training required for them or not? And then, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you just need to do manual overrides. Sometimes we have people who spend like 3 minutes and it's 5 minutes, and that person, maybe they're an executive. So I'm like, all right, I'll let it slide. So their training is complete. They did enough. And so you just go in and, overwrite that. So that way they've completed the training. And that's the basics of it. So feel free to, if you can get Google Analytics connected and you've got your people data set, you can, if you don't know, you can just, highlight over this entire data flow and paste it in your own instance, connect your data, run it, and boom, you'll have to recreate the dashboard in Pages unless you know how to export all the definitions for that and upload them. But that's pretty much everything in the basics. I think we're strapped for time. So. All right.